Hey there, folks. Welcome to this Life Without Limits. I am your host, Weston McWhorter. And on today's episode, I am going to provide a little bit more detail around the treatment path that has been prescribed for my cancer, and also to do a little recap on week 1 and week 2, checking a little bit about how I'm feeling right now. As with last week's episode, this is largely going to be unedited. I will, if you're watching this on YouTube, I am going to do some image overlays in the edits just to kind of like describe some of the things that I'm talking about today. And for those of you listening, I'll do my best to drop into the show notes, at least on my website, westonmcwhorter.com, some of the images that I'm sharing in YouTube so that you can have an idea of what I'm talking about. Other than that, it's going to be a little bit freestyle. You'll notice that my voice is starting to change a little bit. I'm recording this at the beginning of week 3 of treatment. So I've had 11 radiation treatments under my belt so far. So we'll talk about all that later. So first of all, what I wanted to do is just a brief recap of kind of how I got here, including, how the symptoms kind of presented in my body, the diagnosis, and then the determination of the team that I'm working with. So going back again, just briefly, the way that this cancer presented in my body initially was, and this has been a while, has been a swollen right tonsil, really for as long as I can remember. And I don't actually have a date for what that means when I say that, but just for as long as I can remember, my right tonsil has always been a little bit bigger than my left, just anecdotally, right? And back in October, last fall, I had a piece of my right tonsil turn kind of like looked bruised and bloodied, and I ended up like being able to kind of like knock that part off, just using a Q-tip or whatever, and that, again, kind of typical me. I didn't really think too much necessarily of that, strangely enough. But anyway, a couple of months later, as I'm taking a trip down to Texas, I started to notice swelling on the right side of my neck. It didn't feel like a tonsil, but the important thing I think to mention here is that there was no pain associated with any of this, right? There were no symptoms, right? Like if you start to, get on the internet and kind of Google symptoms for, like when you might start having cancer, there are things out there, that you can start to see. And I had, other than this lymph node beginning to swell, no symptoms at all, no pain, no fever, no change in diet, no change in mental health, anything like that. I was really just in a spot where I've got this crazy lymph node poking out. It did kind of like, I don't know if it concerned me, but I just thought it was curious that there was no pain, like that was kind of my thing. So anyway, fast forward a couple more months, I end up getting into kind of a stream of doctor's appointments, right? First with my primary care physician to get her to, take a look at it, ultimately to get me a referral to an ENT that I needed to see, to just kind of like throw a scope in my nose and, kind of feel up on my neck and see if they could come up with an idea of maybe what was going on. The first ENT I saw referred me to the gentleman I mentioned on the previous episode, Dr. Girantano at Georgetown University, who's a head and neck cancer specialist. And he and I sat down and he was like, yeah, like looking at the biopsy results that you've had, listening to you talk about your symptoms. My concern is that, this might be a type of cancer that presents exactly in this way with like really no noticeable symptoms other than a swollen lymph node. What I'd like to do is, shoot you this blood test or have you go through this blood test and let's see if it returns back positive for HPV, right? And so again, we went through all of that and got the results back from the blood work that that it was highly positive for HPV. Now there's like a particular test that there's this score that's kind of associated with that. And I don't know, let's just call it on a scale of 0 to 100. I was maybe at 70, right? So, positive, like highly positive, not like even like, well, maybe you're positive. Like there's definitely HPV DNA being shed into your blood. Therefore, my opinion is that this is an HPV-related oropharyngeal squamous cell carcinoma. So there's a lot of big words, but basically tonsil cancer that's metastasizing to the lymph node. And that was kind of like where we sort of left that conversation, Dr. Girantano and I. And I told him, I was like, this all sounds cool. He had looked at MRIs and, one of there's a variety of course of action here that you can take when dealing with these types of cancers. So, a surgical approach is something that's called a radical tonsillectomy. So not only would they go in and take the tonsil out, but ideally clear a margin around the tonsil, around the cancer, so that it has a lesser chance of metastasizing into other parts of your body, right? Same thing goes with the lymph node. So it's a radical tonsillectomy plus a neck dissection to take out, any of the lymph nodes that are in there that are potentially affected by this. And, that even that's not like a promise of like getting everything, right? So you may have to go through this radical tonsillectomy, the neck dissection, and then you may also have to have like radiation and chemo, right? So, that was kind of the first thing that was presented. And after, reviewing the MRI scans of the way that the tumor is set up, particularly in my tonsil, it's actually really close to my carotid artery, which is important. I don't know if any of you have taken anatomy and physiology in your lives, but the carotid artery is what feeds blood up into your brain and all the other important bits up there. So his initial reservations were like, look, man, we can't really, like, I'm concerned about the proximity of this artery to the tumor. I don't feel, safe going in there to surgically remove this. So, our recommendation is going to be, probably 7 weeks of radiation and chemo. And we went back and forth with him a little bit on, could we do just a regular tonsillectomy, without like all the other mishigas associated with trying to like clear that margin. And, to his credit, he heard us out. And when I say us, I mean myself and my partner. He listened to our concerns and admittedly was, open to that approach, even though it was outside of the standard of care, So we got all that information from him. It was like this willingness to maybe do the standard tonsillectomy plus radiation and chemo. Maybe we could reduce the amount of radiation and chemo I had to have if we got that done. So I said, thank you. We're going to go get a second opinion from Johns Hopkins. And so, I gathered up my binder of all my stuff and went over to Baltimore and met with the surgeon over there, who's also the head of, I guess I should say this different head of head and neck cancer. She's the chief of head and neck cancer for the Johns Hopkins system. Her name is Dr. Carol Fakhri. And, she also, when I first walked in there, was like, yeah, no problem. I can get in there. We've got, robots that go in there and do this surgery and we pull it out. Everything will be fine. She didn't say everything would be fine. She said, I got you, basically. And so, I was kind of like taken aback. I was like, wow, well, I was just at Georgetown. They said, maybe that's not the best course of action. But you're the expert. So let me just kind of like lean into that a little bit and continue to go through this process of getting this second opinion, like really dialed. So I meet with Dr. Fakhri. She's of the opinion that, maybe surgery is a strong option for me. I'm like, cool. I met with the medical oncologist at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, a man named Dr. Tanguy Seiwert. And he, one of the things that really attracted me to Johns Hopkins is that they have a immunotherapy trial underway for that's specifically focused on this type of cancer. So HPV-related head and neck cancers. And I was, curious about that. I don't know a lot about the difference between immunotherapy and chemotherapy. I'm just continuing to educate myself on this process as I go through it. But I liked the idea of that versus chemo, right? So just trying to like ascertain, what are our different options, with this idea that like the short-term goal, right, is to cure this, right? We're not just treating this disease in my body. We're actually going to cure it. And to even say that about cancer right now, like, I don't know, man, like I have a lot of mixed feelings, even being able to say these words, like I could potentially be cured from cancer. Just knowing that for so many people in the world with this disease and the variety of diseases that are lumped into the quote unquote cancer bucket, that a cure is not an option. It's like treatment, like ensuring, quality of life for as long as this disease is present in your body. Like that's a really common and painful path. People are given, sometimes weeks or months or days or whatever to years, if they're fortunate to experience this disease. And so I just acknowledge the fact that like, even from the very beginning of this conversation with Dr. Girantano back in April, he was like, I'm not worried about your life. I'm not worried about, your long-term, like the long-term outcomes here. Like you're going to be fine. And, I mean, hearing that is great. Right. And there's a real opportunity, I think, when you hear those words, like you got nothing to worry about. Like I heard people say, if you're going to get cancer, like this is the one to get because it's so treatable and you're going to be fine and all this stuff, is to really like bypass the opportunity to learn and grow through this process. So I'm not going to dwell too much on that because you're going to hear a lot. You're going to hear me talk a lot about that, especially, as I move through this treatment on the other side, like kind of the spiritual component of this for me, the transformational component of this for me. I have a whole lot to say about that. So I want to stay on the treatment piece. So we go in, we meet with Dr. Fakhri, we meet with Dr. Seiwert. I meet with Dr. Harry Kwan, who is the radiologist at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And, I was really excited also to connect with him because his presentation of the radiation plan, and again, this is on like a whiteboard, just kind of drawing a crazy shape of my neck. I think I have a picture of it somewhere that I can like share in the video edits. But the neat thing was that, he described a very targeted approach to the radiation therapy that would really like get in there and take care of the business we needed to take care of without a lot of collateral damage. Right. Which is cool. Like as a designer, like the idea of like, mapping and like really shaping this treatment to what the situation is, rather than just like, blasting random radiation in my head, was exciting, So, as we met with those guys, we had to, we met with everybody. We're like, yes, okay, this sounds great. We love this team. what's next? So Dr. Fakri was like, okay, we got to get you scheduled for this biopsy. I'm like, cool. Because without like a real diagnosis, I mean, that's just part of the process, right? Like you really need to get a diagnosis of what's going on. And so we go in at the end of July. I get, a couple of chunks taken out of my tonsil. The biopsy results, do show that this is definitely cancer, what we're dealing with. And so very quickly after that, we kind of got into the process of meeting with everybody to get the plan going. Now, I live in Washington, D.C. currently, just outside of Washington, D.C. Baltimore is like, anywhere from like an hour and a half drive from here, just depending on traffic. And as we were, kind of meeting with everybody and figuring out what we were going to do, they're like, look, radiation, is going to be 7 weeks, right? Like that's ultimately what we're going to talk about here is like surgery is off the table. Immunotherapy is off the table. The best course of action that we're recommending is 7 weeks of concurrent chemotherapy and radiation. So after kind of making peace with that, really became a question of logistics, right? Like I have a son, it's school time now. I can't really be going to Baltimore every day for radiation, like even though they have like housing, like affordable housing, or maybe even free housing for people in treatment in Baltimore. I was like, dude, I can't, like, we got to figure something else out, And so the really like fortunate, incredibly cool thing about the Johns Hopkins system is that there's a hospital 3 miles from where I live, Sibley Memorial Hospital, that has the same setup. Okay, so they've got a medical oncology what's the word, department. They've got a radiation oncology department there. And all the doctors are connected, right? So they're all part of this head and neck cancer board. Okay. So everybody's collaborating, everybody's speaking with each other, everybody's meeting every week, discussing patient cases. And it's like 3 miles from my house. So, we got introduced to the team at Sibley Hospital. Okay. So, and I'll just kind of mention them briefly because, they're who I'm seeing like basically every single day. So on the radiation oncology side, my doctor there is Dr. Carmen Cutt. Her nurse practitioner is a really, really cool dude named Richie. So I see them pretty much on a weekly basis, just for like, doing scopes in my nose and down into my throat to kind of check the progress, to discuss any kind of issues with side effects, symptoms, things like that. And yeah, so they're actively engaged in the process of managing this treatment for me. On the medical oncology side, the chemo side, that's being headed up by Dr. Kareem Boudadi and his nurse practitioner, Rachel. And again, I see them just about once a week. I have to, kind of get cleared for chemo every week. And so Rachel and I have been meeting just to talk about how I'm doing, So that's been, really supportive. It's been great, like building relationships with them. I mean, honestly, like I'm having a lot of fun, like in this collaborative kind of relationship with my doctors and the care team at Sibley. And then I just got to give a shout out to the nurses, the radiation nurses that I see every day, Karen and Macy and Mila. I mean, I show up in there, they turn on their Bluetooth speaker. They let me like play whatever music I want to play. They're just really like really incredible women. And, I'm just grateful that I get to, spend some of my time with them every single day. So that's just a little bit of description of like the team that I'm working with. So talk about the treatment path, right? So, I've got some notes that I'm just going to like kind of riff off of here a little bit. So again, the recommendation for the allopathic treatment for this disease is 7 weeks of radiation and chemotherapy. So both of these treatments are what they would consider to be fractionalized or low dose, right? So low dose chemotherapy, fractionalized low dose radiation therapy. And the overall net effects of these treatments are cumulative, right? So it's not like every time you get hit with a dose of radiation or a dose of chemo that, I'm trying to say this the right way, that you feel it, right? Like I kind of don't feel anything until later. It's like an accumulation of treatment. I also just wanted to again, sort of bring back into here that, this treatment plan is pretty much standard of care for this type of cancer. So again, surgery is also an option, but I mean, as I've kind of learned from other doctors that I've spoken to, and just plainly my partner's brother, he said to me a couple of weeks ago when we were visiting them that, you want to avoid surgery at all costs. And that, I don't know, that really landed with me when he said that, because I think I was of a different opinion early on. It was like, let's cut this shit out of here. I don't want it in my body. I mean, in a lot of ways, like let's fast track this thing, right? And that's not only coming from me, but that's coming from friends and family. Like, oh, let's get on it. Like, don't fool around. Like, let's do this. But when he said that, it really landed. It was like, yeah, surgery is super invasive. It may have a positive outcome, but it's super invasive, particularly for this surgery in particular, right? I mean, I said particular for in particular. That I won't edit that out, but the recovery for this type of surgery, the radical tonsillectomy, is pretty gnarly. Not only is that surgery gnarly, but the recovery is pretty gnarly. So looking back on where we're at, even knowing what I think might be ahead in terms of how these treatments are going to plan out, I'm grateful to both Dr. Girantano and Dr. Fakhri for kind of taking a step back from that surgical option, and allowing us to proceed with this plan. So again, the outlook for this and the prognosis is really, really positive. I'm going to go through it, but long term, again, the idea here is that we're going to cure this and not just treat it. So all right, so talking about chemo a little bit, it's really pretty straightforward. I go once a week on Thursdays, and it's a 6-hour treatment. So I've got radiation right before that. I got radiation 5 days a week. I'll talk about that in a second. But I go for radiation before, drop into medical oncology, into the infusion center, and basically just hop in a room, and they hook me up to an IV. And the way that the medicine gets administered is kind of 2.5 hours of fluids and anti-nausea medication, followed by about an hour of the cisplatin chemo drug, and then another 2.5 hours of fluid on the other side of that. So why so many fluids, right? And this is there are all types of ways to receive chemo. You can get in an injection, a pill. Sometimes it's an hour of an infusion. Just really depends. Again, all of this is highly independent on what it is that they're trying to treat. Okay, so but I'm in there for 6 hours, and what the way that this drug in particular has been described to me, and you can, of course, like the internet is there for you to, Google cisplatin and understand what that medicine is about. But the way it's been described in this setup is that, and I'm not going to use the right technical term, but it's basically a catalyst for the radiation, okay, to work better. The way that I think about it, and this is really kind of the only analogy that I can kind of come up with, and I use it. I use it a little hesitantly because I am trying to choose words in this journey that are positive, that are, in a lot of ways building my relationship with my body, building my relationship with this disease in my body, not in a relationship that's adversarial, but I mean, I guess the best way is like taking a college course that you really don't want to take, but it's like really good for you if you do take it. So anyway, there's a lot to learn here, and words matter. But the only thing that I can come up with in terms of an analogy here is a battle, right? A lot of people talk, oh, you're in a battle with cancer. I'm going to fight this cancer. And it's like, yes. And there's another way to talk about this, but for the sake of actually telling this story and not droning on and on, cisplatin, the way that I think about it, is like an aerial assault on an enemy, right? So maybe you go in there with high altitude bombers, maybe you go in there with drones, right? Something to kind of like drop bombs, soften up the enemy. But it's kind of like at a higher level. And I mean, it really, cisplatin, because it is infused into my body, it is going into every part of my bloodstream, my bone marrow, my kidneys, like it's all in there, right? And particularly, well, let's say this. So then the cisplatin goes in there, kind of carpet bombs the place so that the foot soldiers, the ground troops, the radiation can go in there and like really clean out any resistance, right? Any remaining parts of the enemy lines, I guess. So I'm going to set that analogy down because I really don't like talking about war and battle and all that stuff. And get back to cisplatin. So it's really, this medicine in particular is really hard on the kidneys, and also the immune system. Like this whole process is hard on the immune system, right? So I am getting blood work done every single week. I go in, get labs like CMP, CBC, some other measures as well to make sure that that I'm okay, like in my internal environment is okay, so that I can go get chemo, right? Also very important with this medicine in particular is hydration, right? So cisplatin really, like, again, it's administered to me on Thursdays. I think it's got about a 48-hour half-life before it starts to leave my body. So during that time, like, I'm just trying to drink as much water as I possibly can, just to like support my kidney function, try to flush that stuff out of my system as best I can. And yeah, with the idea that like it's in there, it's doing its job, but let's get it out, so that I can, my body can get back to functioning and healing as quickly as possible. Okay. So the other thing about cisplatin is that it's highly emetic, which means it's really known for creating a lot of problems with nausea, vomiting, and things like that. So I will say that, and I want to speak a little bit more about this when I talk about medication supplementation here in a second, but managing that side effect is really important, because particularly with head and neck cancer, and I would just say like throat cancer, it's really important that I eat. Okay. So, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, but very early on when I was meeting with Dr. Cutt and they were describing, this progression of side effects and symptoms and things like that. They start talking about weight loss and preventing that. It's like basically cancer patients and pregnant women are like the two, like patient populations that they want to avoid weight loss as much as possible, right? And so I am weighing in every time I go to the doctor, and just doing my best to like maintain the weight. And I mean, I'm a tall dude, but I'm not big, so I don't gain weight easily. These are all, good problems to have, but nevertheless, it's like, being able to maintain my diet, my appetite, et cetera, is like at the top of the list here. So managing nausea symptoms is key, right? And again, I'll talk about, kind of the medication stuff and prescriptions that I'm on here in a second, but that's pretty much a wrap up of like the chemo, right? So 7 weeks, 6-hour infusions, cisplatin is the medicine. And I gotta watch my hydration and my blood work. So that's kind of the chemo piece. On the radiation side, I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. On the radiation side, fascinating, totally fascinating. So before we even can determine how we're going to approach this, you've got an MRI scan of my head and neck, really down to, kind of like at the top of my chest, right? So that we can see where the tumor setup is. We can see where maybe it's metastasizing to, and to develop a plan from there. So I first meet up with the radiation team, and I'm going to get this whole thing wrong, but I'm just going to use the word mock-up, right? So for those of you who aren't designers or graphic designers or things like that, mock-up is basically like a model of how the treatment is going to map onto my body, right? And part of that process is going in and getting fitted with a mask, which is this crazy polymer thing that is its sole purpose is to basically pin my head to this board, like I'm kind of laying down, right? So pin your head tight to this board, so that you can't wiggle, right? You don't want to wiggle and like mess up where they're trying to target the radiation. And then, okay, so you go in, you get fitted for this mask. They've got the MRI, and then from there, there's Dr. Cut and Dr. Kwan, and the whole team, like developing this like really targeted radiation plan. Okay, and so what I'm going to do, like again for the video version of this, I've got some pictures that I'm going to overlay here that that show not only how the mask fits on me, but also like a few images of like the MRI scan, and then the overlays of the radiation dosing, right? So not only is it fractionalized dosing over 35 days, but even within the daily treatments I have, I think titrated is probably a better word. The radiation is titrated so that I'm getting the most exposure where the disease is, right? And then as we sort of like move out, because again, and I'll share this, the radiation is being administered like, and I'll show you like on my chest too. The radiation is being administered on both sides of my neck, primarily on the right side where the cancer is, a little bit towards the back of my neck, and then down into like my collarbone area. You can sort of see this in the video. And in fact, I'm actually kind of starting to get a little bit of a neck and collarbone tan from the treatments, right? there was not metastasis shown in the lymph nodes down near my collarbone, but it's out of an abundance of caution, right, to treat those areas. And so as the proximity moves out from the cancer itself, that radiation becomes less and less, right? So the dosing is titrated, which is really cool, right? So they're able to kind of like create this protective layer while also really focusing in on where the disease lives, So all that being said, that's the radiation plan. I go in, daily, unless it's a federal holiday or something like that. Going in daily to lay on that board for about 20 minutes, get sunshine blasted into my neck, and I'm off and about my day. So that's a pretty good overview of both chemo and the radiation. And I just want to talk for a second about the medication and supplementation that I am taking. Okay. So it's a lot. In fact, I've got kind of an array of stuff here on my desk that I wanted to talk through. So, but particularly with the prescriptions, right? The prescription medication, the goal of this is really all about side effect management. Okay. So it's pain, it's nausea, it's also oral health. So a lot of what I'm going to share here, like under the medication piece, is that's its purpose, right? So again, ideas to treat these side effects, knowing that early on, they may not be that pronounced, but by week 6, 7, 8, I mean, the way it's described to me is I'll just use Richie's words. He said, like, the week after you're done with radiation is called hell week. And I'm like, damn, okay. Like I'm holding space for like all kinds of possibilities that like maybe I won't have to deal with hell week. And, it's out there it's out there in my consciousness now, so trying to manage these side effects cumulatively. So first thing I'm on is gabapentin. Okay. So a lot of people, like when I talk about gabapentin, they're like, oh yeah, I take one for sleeping at night, or I'm familiar with that gabapentin's been around for a long time. It's great medicine. And I'm taking like 2,700 milligrams a day, so it's basically like 900 milligrams 3 times a day, which is a lot. And gabapentin has, as I've ramped up on it, because there's a ramp up period. Like I didn't just start taking 2,700 milligrams. I noticed that like it gets me high, right? Like I mean, not high, but like definitely in that zone of like, I don't know if I should like drive to the grocery store right now. That was kind of my experience as I was like ramping up on it, noticing like in my body how I was being affected by it. I'm now in like week 4 of taking this stuff. I'm at 2,700 milligrams. Those effects have largely kind of like plateaued, so I can work, I can function on this medicine now. It's not like I'm concerned. And yet I know that like on the other side of treatment, there's also a taper down period, to allow me to like move this medicine out of my body, So gabapentin works on the central nervous system. It's kind of a nerve blocker. So it's kind of like my primary pain medication. It is in the goal with this pain management, as it's been described to me by Dr. Cutt, is like, we want to try to stay at a 2 and a 3 in terms of like my experience of pain. And so I also have liquid oxycodone, which is on the shelf for now. I really am like not interested in taking that medicine at all, for all kinds of reasons, but I have it if I need it. And I'll just feel into, how that flows into this whole plan. Also have something called, magic mouthwash, which is I don't know all the things in here, but it's like a lidocaine solution that I just put in my mouth, swish it around, maybe gargle with it a little bit. And again, I haven't used this yet, but the idea is that, as the side effects of radiation, I'll talk a little bit about what I'm experiencing here towards the end, but as the side effects begin to accumulate in my mouth, I can expect to have pain in there. And again, with the idea that like, I don't want a feeding tube. I really want to continue to eat as much as I can. Like I've got to be able to like do that, so as pain-free as possible. The other medications that I get prescribed is for anti-nausea. So I've got something called Zofran. I've got something called Decadron. Those are kind of my primary anti-nausea medications I take for like 3 days after I get cisplatin. And then I've got kind of an emergency nausea medicine called Compazine as well. So I haven't taken that yet. I haven't really had a lot of nausea symptoms, thank good. Knocking on some wood. So that's been pretty dope. The other piece that I guess I didn't mention in the sort of the on-ramp of getting into treatment was going to see a dentist, right? Because as this radiation is like being targeted here in this part of my neck, it's hitting salivary glands, it's hitting my jawbone. And it was very like, it was brought to my attention very early on that oral health during this period is like really important, and I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm like the guy that goes to the dentist and he's like, do you floss? And I'm like, not really, man. Like I do it before I come in here so I can feel good about myself. But anyway, so oral health during this period is really important. And I got this like crazy prescription toothpaste that is like, and I don't really know like fluoride, like how much is in like over the counter toothpaste versus something like this. But apparently it's a whole lot of fluoride. And the idea is to, make sure that I'm brushing with this at least like once a day, preferably before bed. So it can like really sit in there and sink in and like really protect those teeth from decay, because again, cumulatively, as this process goes on and, my mouth becomes like my salivary glands become more and more affected, the chance of tooth decay, because the saliva is reduced in my mouth, the chance of tooth decay goes way up, right? So it was described to me as like, something that might happen in over months or maybe even a year or so in terms of tooth decay, and like normal mouth could happen in like days or a week, like very, very fast, because of the environment in my mouth. So keeping this mouth moist is like my job, right? The other piece, and this, just holding this up, this is a jar of baking soda and salt, which is, I use it kind of like to swish around like 5 or 6 times a day to like help clean my mouth out and things like that, So that is kind of the prescription, even though this is in a mason jar. It was, that formula was given to me by the doctors, So anyway, that's the prescription medication side of things. On the supplementation side, right? So this is, kind of the naturopathic and kind of integrative side of care, right? Which is largely my responsibility. This path for me is really designed, not only to be supportive of like my overall health, and that means like immune support, and then also like short-term and long-term, like cellular repair and recovery. Those are kind of my primary concerns, right? Support my immune system, and then also do whatever I can to support the healing inside of my body, right? And most of this supplementation is really guided by my own research into this, books, internet searches, cross-referencing with contraindications for cisplatin and radiation therapy, so that I am taking an active role in, taking care of my body through this process, while also acknowledging that there's an allopathic component to this that I need to be mindful of. Because again, the idea is like, I want to cure this. I want to heal it completely. And I don't want to do anything that's going to get in the way of that. All right. So one of the things that I will just say is sort of an example of really needing to kind of like review and I think take a place of like curiosity and openness and humility, and knowing that like we don't know all things, right? 2 heads are better than one, and 10 heads are definitely better than one, right? So, for example, there's, and again, I'm not an expert on this. I'm not like, saying one thing works for this person, doesn't work. This is literally my story, okay? And my process of discernment and filtration and like a quest for clarity around what's going to be most supportive for me and my cancer in this treatment, right? So I'm just going to call forward something like antioxidants, like high dose vitamin C, as something that gets put forward very quickly as an immune system support. But because radiation is an oxidative process in your body, taking high dose antioxidants, any supplementation of antioxidants, is going to be contraindicative to the effectiveness of radiation therapy. Okay. So just want to call that one out because, it's both immune and all the things. But like, I'm choosing not to supplement with any antioxidants at all because of that. So, I'll go through this quickly. Again, I'm not going to like describe why I'm taking each one of these things. I'll probably end up doing a blog post about that because I feel like that's a little bit better format for describing this. But I'm just going to do the laundry list of supplements that I am currently taking for my support, right? I'm going to start out with SEAC-T. Okay. So I can't really see this because of light and things like that, but SEAC-T has been, it's a herbal blend of tea that you can, I'll provide some links. You can do some Googling on that. But its idea is really to, create kind of a foundation for GI health. It's shown, over time in various people to be really supportive, both in prevention of cancer, in the treatment process, and then after treatment, when you're just going about your life. It's very supportive of general overall health. Okay. So into that SEAC-T every day, I drop a little turkey tail extract that is also designed to help support the immune system in all the ways that mushrooms can do. I'm also taking a B12 supplement. And I'm just going to run through these real quick. A B12 supplement, a curcumin supplement, which is the active ingredient in turmeric, helps with inflammation. Talk more about that later. I'm taking a probiotic every day. I am taking a vitamin D supplement that also has K1 and K2 in it. I'm taking a L-glutamine supplement that I just started taking and it's really helpful for cellular repair, things like that. I'm taking a kind of full spectrum omega 3, 6, 7, 9. So lots of fish oil supplements too. And then beta glucan, which is also really supportive for immune system function and cellular repair. And last but not least, I have my medical cannabis card here in Maryland. And so I am also supplementing with RSO, or Rick Simpson oil. That's really like at night for sleep, some pain management, but mostly for sleep. And then also, when you get a medical cannabis card, you get access to kind of like a whole other level of edibles I'm not smoking cannabis. I don't really smoke cannabis. I prefer to ingest it. So I've got some edibles to help with mood, to help with appetite, to help with pain, things like that. I've been a little hesitant to introduce cannabis into in the mix yet, just because some of the side effects with gabapentin may be a little higher than necessary, right? And I want to function, right? So I'm just sort of playing and feeling into, where cannabis is going to land in that spectrum of supplementation options. But it's there, and frankly, like, I mean, look, all these things that I'm wheeling out here, like ultimately, you want to get all of your vitamins, all of your nutrients, everything your body needs, you can be found in food, right? And in this, I mean, the reason this supplementation feels so intense right now, it feels intense to me, is because I'm in a unique circumstance, so I'm just really trying to create an environment that gives me the greatest chance of, having successful treatment, and also, having the best long-term outcomes. So I'll move on from that, do a quick recap of the how things have gone so far. So I'm at the beginning of week 3. Okay. So I'm going to talk about week 1, really week 1.5, which is kind of like my first 6 treatments. I had 2 radiation treatments and chemo before the Labor Day break. And I noticed that, some fatigue was coming up in my body from that. And my partner's mom, we celebrated her birthday that weekend and went up to New Jersey. And I just noticed that, like, they're Italian. So we had this incredible Italian meal. And I'm just thinking, like, oh my God, like, I want to eat everything here. And was paying attention after the chemo, right, to what was going on in my belly, just feeling a little bit like off, not bad nausea, but just noticing that, like, okay, this is about to start happening. Like, you need to pay attention to, like, how you're feeling, so just really noticing, like, some fatigue and, and some of the belly issues, also still coping some with the gabapentin ramp up. And yeah, just taking my time to kind of acclimate to all of that. So go through the Labor Day holiday and get into, really like the first, the next 4 treatments. I can't even say it's a full week because we had Monday off, but the next 4 treatments of radiation and another chemo. I had the pleasure of having my partner with me on that Thursday and Friday to, hang out in the chemo room with me and just, share stories and feelings and things that were coming up for both of us around, like, this journey that I'm on, that she is on, because of her position in life as my partner, and it was just a really, beautiful time of, like, bonding and just sharing with her, like, what this experience is. Right. She also came with me on Friday to get my radiation treatment and have a meeting, or like a weekly meeting with Dr. Cutt. So that meeting on Friday, Dr. Cutt put and this is after 6 treatments, right? So Dr. Cutt puts the scope up my nose and down into my throat. She's taking some pictures down in there. And when we're reviewing the photographs, like the comparative images, and I'm going to share some of this on the video, the comparative images from, I believe it was August 15th or something like that, like right when we were doing the initial workup. We were showing the scans from mid-August to Friday, the Friday after Labor Day. There was a dramatic reduction in the size of the tonsil, right? Not only that, but, and you can see this on the video, right? A dramatic response or reduction size of the lymph node too. So we go in there. That's very exciting news. Like, we're looking at these pictures. I'm like, oh my God. And she's like, sharing that, like, I'm maybe like 1 or 2 patients that she's ever had that shows this kind of response after 1 week of treatment, So I'm like, yay, like, model patient. which is very encouraging. She was very excited about that. And then we sat down to talk about, and this is really why I wanted my partner there with me, because I wanted Dr. Cutt to explain the radiation plan to her in a way that I just frankly couldn't, because, I just couldn't, because I don't have the like technical knowledge to like really explain that. And coming from a doctor, I think it makes more sense. So she went through, the plan for my neck. She showed like, excuse me, this kind of 3D model of my head and like where the radiation is sort of mapped onto my head. And, we understood the fractionalized dosing, also the titrated dosing. And then we got to the part of, really like why we're treating this in the way that we are, which brought us into the staging, right? And I think initially when we were, when the workups were being done on this cancer, it was basically stage 1. And I've mentioned this in previous posts, right? But these situations are fluid, right? So, ultimately having, the staging be set at, 2.5 is basically the way she described it. She was like, if you want to, she's like, it's kind of like almost 3, but really 2. And, and I was like, what are we talking about, dude? Don't mess around here. And she's like, we'll just call it 2-3. And I'm like, okay, 2-3. And I said, well, what does that mean? She said, well, the long-term survivability of this is, I'm not going to remember these numbers correctly, but it was like 75 to 85%, right? Whereas stage 1 is like high 90s, and then she layers onto that, these are largely academic measures, which I feel like that landed with me, right? That when somebody is presented with a staging of your cancer, they're looking at, not only what's present in you, but how this has presented in other people, right? The reason we went to 2-3 was because, it's showing in the MRI a little bit of a spread up into my soft palate, a little bit of a creep into to the base of my tongue, and also, some of the suspicious lymph nodes that are kind of showing up in my neck. Okay, so it's not just the tonsil and lymph node; it's now like kind of in the soft palate, kind of in my tongue, and so that's the reason for like the modification of the staging. So again, the idea here is that, they're presenting this as a benchmark based on the average population, right? And doesn't really take into account like my personal self, right? And the fact that I know I'm going to be 100% healed from this, and I know I'm going to be 100%, like there's no doubt in my mind that whatever it takes, my body and this disease are going to part ways. It's going to be a journey, and I'm here for it. So, a couple more things to note about week 1 is that, my body was feeling really solid. My appetite was great. In fact, after Thursday's chemo treatment, my partner and I was like, I want a hamburger, I want fries, I want bacon, I want all this stuff. We went and found it. It's like I manifested this perfect meal for myself, went and crushed this food. My attitude is really good. It's really solid. My mental health is solid. And then even that weekend I went for, I've been dying to go ride my bike. And I went for this like really long 2.5 hour bike ride down to Alexandria, which was dope. I mean, it was a beautiful day. Felt really good to get out there and just be like in my body, doing something I love, casting a vote for like my health. Right. So, couple other things though about week 1. If you follow me on social media, you've heard about this. I posted about it on that Friday. It was really just, kind of managing the emotional like waves of, being in relationship, right? Like this is my journey, but I have a son, I have a family, I have a partner, and managing like holding space for their process, right, has been something that, not only started to come up that week, but it continues to evolve, it isn't easy, and really just trying to, particularly where my partner's concerned, be very open and mindful of her sensitivities, right? To me, to this disease, to what's going on in my body, to what's in my body, keeping her safe from what's in my body. It's a lot, so, and just also, noticing like how our ability to relate intimately is evolving as well, and the opportunities that are there to, connect on deeper levels than maybe we have previously, so, so that's something that's really, that's began to be present in week one. I also lost my job at the end of week one. So that, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. Is what it is. I'm right now, I'm focusing on, this journey and my health, but, yeah, that was a really interesting clearing that I'm not sure that I necessarily expected to have to, plan for on that Friday, but nevertheless, now I'm unemployed, which is cool. So moving on to week two, I go into week two. I have to start every week going to get blood work done. Like I mentioned earlier, those results came back good, which clears me for chemotherapy. I will say that in week two, my radiation, I'm progressing well. In fact, I even made a banana bread for all my radiation nurses on Thursday. Took that in for them. But I am beginning to notice in this process, like some scratchiness developing in my mouth and in my throat. I'm noticing some mucus buildup. Again, all of this is like part of the deal where, the treatment is going to like basically continue to like have these effects on the mucous membranes inside my mouth. I also had the opportunity to see a speech therapist who is really like, her purpose is to make sure that this whole apparatus, my mouth, my throat, my swallowing muscles, everything like is, emerges as intact as possible, particularly the swallowing muscles, right? So I've got all kinds of like exercises I have to do every day, like opening and closing my mouth, moving my mouth side to side, doing this kind of like chewing motion just to make sure that like, all this range of motion stays intact as possible. I also got this little ball I got to do like neck exercises just to strengthen like these muscles. I've got some, swallowing exercises that I have to do too. I'm noticing that I don't really have like issues with the swallowing right now. But there is some pain starting to develop like in the top of my mouth that I just have to pay attention to, because it's like, it makes it a little like sketchy to swallow. Thursday, I had my buddy Sound come and sit with me in chemo, which was incredible to have that brother with me. And then Friday, I really started feeling pretty rough from the radiation. This is just this last Friday. And, again, I'm noticing that really what is going to be critical for me is rest, like coming up with a fueling strategy to get like 2,500 calories in my body a day so I don't lose weight, and hydration, and like I'm open to however this path evolves. But I really don't want to have a feeding tube in my body. So I'm just putting that out there to the universe, as just saying that like, I'm noticing how I'm feeling physically, and it's foreshadowing a little bit for me, at least causing me to pay attention to, what I need to do for the future. So I'll just wrap up by saying, how am I doing? Right. I mean, I think overall, I'm doing pretty well, all things considered. I am I mean, grateful doesn't even really, it isn't even a word. I mean, I say that word grateful all the time, and maybe that is the best word, but it's more than gratitude that I have for everyone for their love and their support, right? I'm talking about messages that people have sent, cards, emails, contributions to the GoFundMe. I mean, it's so like, I'm so grateful, especially having lost my job, so grateful for the opportunity to have some space not to worry about how I'm going to take care of myself and my son through the next, couple of months, hopefully. All the hugs, all the holding space, the healings that I've received from people. And all the prayers for like myself and my family. I just want you to know that it's received, even though sometimes it feels overwhelming, that I'm receiving that. And I'm also noticing at the same time, and I feel like this is an important part of my work, is that I'm noticing how much I want to skip to the survivor story. I don't want to, like, there's no part of me that wants to do this. There's no part of me that wants another, 5 weeks of this. And that is a big part of how I've lived my life, of wanting to take shortcuts, wanting to defer pain, wanting to numb things out of my life, wanting to escape, and so the truth is, like, there is no way for me to escape this rite of passage. There's no way for me to escape it. And so the choice is like to lean in every single day, to this daily practice of self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, and self-expression. And, part of the way I'm doing that is, through recording these podcasts, trying to lead meditations on insight timers best I can, getting clear about what my truth is and allowing that to be expressed, fully. So, along with the trust and the patience and the presence that I'm just trying to bring to this process is also deep listening, like deepening my ability to listen to my body, to my doctors, to those who care for me, to Great Spirit, the divine, the universe, God, all of that. So that, on the other side of this, I will have like transformed wholly, That's it, man, for today. Thank you for listening. I really had no idea how long this was going to go, but I appreciate your patience and your support. If there's somebody in your life, that you feel like this could be helpful for, please, feel free to, share this video, or, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts, feel free to share this with somebody that you may think it might support. Maybe it's supporting you. Either way, my only goal here is to be of service. So just sending you all a lot of blessings, a lot of love for an incredible week. My intention is to drop another one of these next Monday. But as you can hear, we're just going to take it a week at a time, day at a time. So with that, I'm out. I got to go get to radiation and get my week going. So peace and love. We'll see y'all soon. That's it for this episode of This Life Without Limits. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and will join me again for future episodes.
If you want to stay updated on new releases, hit the subscribe button below, and don't forget to check out the show notes for additional details and links. I'd also love to hear what you think about the content of this episode, so please feel welcome to drop any comments, thoughts, questions, critique, any of that below. Thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to next time. Until then, here's to a life without limits, my friends.